So today is an exciting day in doing that. The City of Washougal has provided the leadership. The Railroad Crossing Elimination Grant Program has created opportunity, and the Secretary, the President, and Senator Murray, and I, and your Congresswoman all work to say this is a very worthy project to show the nation that we need to get this done. So I want to thank Secretary Buttigieg for his support of this and for coming to Washougal and helping states and communities like this be efficient. Now, I want you to know I stopped by the Pendleton store this morning and got a couple of twin blankets that I hope that you will take back to Washington with you. By the way, there is another bridge thing we want to talk about. But thank you, Secretary, for coming. Secretary Pete Buttigieg.
Well, thanks very much, Senator Cantwell. You all know this, but you are represented by an absolute powerhouse in Washington and the other Washington, chairing the Commerce Committee. Indeed, too, because Senator Murray, who we were able to spend time with yesterday, has been such an important part of all of the good things we've been able to do. But as Senator Cantwell said, she worked to create this railroad crossing elimination program, first time ever that we've had a dedicated fund specifically for the purpose of addressing these railroad crossings that are not only a community headache, but a danger in so many parts of the country. And so in terms of both her advocacy for this specific project and her creation, her leadership role in the creation of this program to begin with, not to mention the bipartisan infrastructure law writ large, we are so thankful for her role and her leadership and her partnership. I want to recognize the mayor and thank you for that warm welcome. I know exactly what it feels like to be a mayor knocking on the door of the U.S. Department of Transportation, trying to get funding for something important to your community. I have no idea what it feels like to come out of that with $40 million, but I gotta think that's a pretty good feeling. So to you, Mayor Stevie, or your Public Works Director and other colleagues, the tribal leaders who are here, the state representatives and senators who've made sure the state is doing its part, WashDOT Director Millar, who's also a national leader in the community of transportation professionals, and just everybody from the community who's here. We so appreciate the chance to be with you to celebrate this good news. We're thankful for the support that this work has had in the House. We were with Representative Kilmer yesterday, who did a lot to get this bipartisan infrastructure law over the line, and I'm so appreciative of Representative Blumenkamp-Perez, who has worked hard to make sure that this project was on our radar, and who is such a great partner in making sure we have the resources to continue to invest in America. And joins me also, I think, in believing that this sort of thing absolutely ought to be cocktail party talk. Not everybody understands the glamour of transportation planning and improvement, but we do. And she's a leader after my own heart. And I appreciate that she began by quoting Ruskin. I think it was also Ruskin who said, "There is no wealth but life. All we have is our time at the end of the day." And it matters in a very deep sense whether you spend any given minute of your time investing it in whatever brings most meaning to your life, being with your children, building your business, deepening your studies, practicing your faith, whatever matters to you, doing that rather than waiting behind a stuck crossing on your way back from Safeway to the south side of the tracks. That's why this matters so much. Not to mention, of course, the safety implications of that. And I think this is a great place to feature the importance of that work. When you see the mix of nature and commerce on the banks of the Columbia River, when you see the tight-knit nature of this community and the sense of mutual support, it reinforces to me the philosophy that guides all of our work in this transportation bill, which is that the answers and the projects aren't going to emanate from Washington, but more of the funding should. And you're coming to us with great ideas, often directly from communities that we are now more than ever able to fund. And I know that this is a great example, because the issue of having the rail line cross the 32nd Street the way it's currently built. The data showed us that 15% of all crashes in Washougal happen on 32nd Street, including a terrible collision at that crossing in recent years. The gate there is down an average of 2.5 hours a day, which doesn't just hold up people at the crossing, that causes backups a quarter mile away. The Congresswoman and Mayor were showing me how that affects State Road 14, which is so important, both for supply chains and goods movement and for people to be able to get to their jobs from this area. And we know that the way that that railroad just cuts the town in two is especially hard on the community immediately south of that intersection. And I know that you all have been working on this for a long time. You came for federal support more than once. And I know that those past applications didn't quite make it, so I want to recognize the tenacity of this community sticking with this vision. And it's exactly with a view toward getting visions like that into reality that President Biden worked so hard with help from the elected leaders here to make sure that that infrastructure law became a reality so that we can say yes to more deserving projects like this. And that's why we're so glad to be here to formally celebrate the $40 million that are going to help reconstruct that 32nd Street underpass and make for a better life and a better routine all across this area. This underpass will have dedicated separated lanes for biking, driving, and walking. It's going to make the possibility of a collision with a vehicle or a pedestrian. It's going to cut that down to 0 at that crossing. It's going to reduce crashes all along 32nd Street. It will mean people across eastern Clark County get that time back in their day with less congestion on the road. And crucially, it's going to allow first responders to get to where they need to be more quickly. It means residents from the Addy neighborhood can have better access to groceries, to schools, to services, to nature, everywhere they need to be. And we think it's going to contribute to a lot of economic development around this vitally important port and the town center. And of course, we're excited about the construction jobs that are coming with just building the underpass itself. And we know that the benefits of this project are going to be felt far from here. As Senator Cantwell was explaining, when we get this right, that means that supply chains across the country benefit. That when you have freight trains that are able to travel at their normal speed rather than having to slow down for that intersection, that means more efficient movement of goods that can benefit people as far away from here as my house in Michigan. And this is not just about moving cheap goods from other countries to the U.S. It also means we're going to better be able to build and sell American-made goods across the country and around the world. And so when you think about the products from here, the products from the manufacturing plants, where we're proud to say there are 800,000 new American manufacturing jobs just since President Biden took office. Getting those famous Pendleton blankets around the world, that all comes back to making sure we have the right kind of infrastructure. And I'm thrilled to say that this is part of a story that we're now able to tell across the country. I've been in South Carolina, in Orangeburg there, we're in Kentucky, in Appalachia a few days ago, Mukilteo, hope I'm saying that right, where we started our journey here in the Pacific Northwest this week. We are rebuilding roads and reinforcing bridges and replacing ferries. We're marking over 35,000 infrastructure projects that have been identified getting more funding. First Lady Dr. Biden and Secretary of Education Miguel Cardona, they've been on the road highlighting new programs that people can join to get trained for these good paying jobs, including in infrastructure and manufacturing. Good jobs that are available whether you have a college degree or not, but they require skill. The Secretary of Health and Human Services, my colleague Javier Becerra, was on the road sharing news about how seniors on Medicare are now paying $35 a month instead of $400 a month for insulin. Gina Raimondo, our Secretary of Commerce, has been announcing investments to make high-speed internet as widely available as electricity, including over $1 billion coming right here to Washington State. So there's so much work going on, and we are going to keep our foot on the accelerator. We are in the early years of a national project to properly invest in America. And it's not going to happen with the stroke of a pen or any one action in Washington, D.C. It's going to happen with good federal policy meeting great local visions. And as we do that, I think over the long run, this will come to be viewed as something akin to the New Deal. I like to call it the big deal, because I think it's a big deal to a community like Washougal, and it's a big deal to the entire country as we build these efforts and these projects and these improvements that are going to shape life as the Congresswoman's quotation so aptly got us thinking about when my twins, who are about to turn 2 years old, are thinking about what their kids and their grandkids are going to be doing. They will be depending on the infrastructure that we are building and laying in place right here in this moment. And that gives us all a lot to be proud of. So thanks for the chance to celebrate this with you, and congratulations to this community. So I think we got a few minutes for reporter questions. My colleague Carrie, our presser, Carrie will quarterback that and take it away.
All right, we're going to start from the right, Drew at KPTV.
Hey, good morning. I was wondering why it's important to you in the Department of Transportation to invest in communities the size of Washougal that may have been passed up for funding before, and what is it like to actually be here, hearing from the community, being in the community, that's going to benefit from this?
Well, a big focus for us that President Biden has made clear to his cabinet that he wants us to focus on, and that it was very much in the legislation that Senator Cantwell and others crafted, is a focus on making sure that communities of all size can benefit. Often it's in a small community that you see in particular a single spot, that intersection, that crossing, that railroad, that something that is a pain point that could be transformed into something that makes everybody better off. And so it's especially rewarding for us to be able to take even relatively small sums in the grand scheme of things. Although in this case, $40 million makes this the biggest single award in the entire railroad crossing elimination ban. And see the impact that that's going to have. We just announced our RAISE grants, another very important program. Half that funding, half that $2.2 billion going to rural areas. And we're very focused on making sure that communities of every type and every size benefit, because wherever you live, regardless of the density, the size, or the politics of your community, you depend on good transportation infrastructure.
Great. Our next question goes to Brandon with Coin TV.
Hello, Secretary. Thank you for joining us today. Senator Cantwell spoke to the increase in traffic that got us to this point today. With the administration leaning on rail or to meet its climate goals, what is the administration and the DOT doing to plan for the next round to take care of these projects before they become possible?
Well, the reality is we have been playing catch-up a lot over the last 40 years of underinvestment in American transportation infrastructure. But we know that we not only need to repair what we've got, we need to build for what's next, because we see that kind of growth, whether it's growth in demand for rail, especially as we try to mode shift in a way that's going to be more climate friendly, or growth in demand for air travel. We just recorded our busiest air travel day in U.S. history. I'd be remiss if I didn't point out that we got cancellation rates back in the neighborhood of 2% right now. But we can't sustain that unless we're building out our airport infrastructure, which is why we're funding improvements from SeaTac to Spokane. And in every mode of transportation, we need to be, as the saying goes, skating to where the puck is going. It's trying to stay a step ahead. This funding is a huge part of how we'll do that, and it's not too soon for us to begin imagining what we should lay in place for the next authorization about 4 years away.
All right, and William with the Columbian.
Thank you for being here. Another big infrastructure project in the region has been mentioned a few times today as the I-5 bridge replacement. It missed out on a $750 million grant earlier this year. As it reapplies for grants, do you anticipate being competitive for federal funding? How do you see it stacking up with other big infrastructure projects throughout the nation right now?
Well, I'm certainly hearing a lot about this project here. I know how big of a priority it is in this community to the states of Washington and Oregon, and I appreciate in particular and want to recognize the work that the states are doing with each other to lay groundwork and make sure that this is as competitive as possible. It is a competitive process, so I can't speak in advance to some of the rounds that are up ahead, but certainly we're conscious of the significance of this project and in close contact with the project sponsors as they build up that stateside support and look toward a vision that would include state and federal dollars coming together to make it happen.
So just like with the at-grade crossing program we created in the bipartisan infrastructure bill, we also created another program called the mega projects. And we did that because previously projects like the Columbia River crossing would have demolished the category and then people weren't funding them. So we wanted to make clear, this is probably the largest infrastructure investment in 30 years in our nation, the bipartisan bill, that we had to start addressing mega projects. And so the mega project application with Oregon just making their decision of the amount of money that we put in, now we should be ready to put an application forth to the mega project. I would also advocate that it's eligible for freight corridor funding too, because this is a major corridor, I-5 all the way from Canada down through the whole West Coast. So I think there's funding opportunities here. The good news is we got a major infrastructure investment through our nation, and now we need to emphasize, again, I think the Secretary is getting it. We're on the Pacific in the era of the Pacific, and there's a lot of growth that comes right through here, and we have to have the infrastructure to support that economic development, not just for our region, but now for the whole nation. And I guarantee you, the I-5 bridge will be one of the most significant economic development project opportunities in our nation to increase economic development capacity and surely quality of life here in the Northwest.
All right, just have a couple minutes left. We'll go over to Corwin here with Northwest News Radio.
Hi, a couple nuts and bolts questions for whoever has the answer regarding the underpass. And firstly, is the project now fully funded? And secondly, is there a start date and perhaps more importantly, a finish date?
I'll defer to the project sponsors on some of the details.
I can give some high level in regards to that inquiry. So for the estimate, which is very, high level to a certain extent, we're looking at a full wrap expense on this project around $55 to $60 million. That's in today's dollars. As we know, the market escalators and the climate that we're in is pretty volatile, not only product, but labor and competitive bid, depending on how we procure the specific project. We're actually in the midst of putting out an RFP/RFQ for assistance on the preferred method to procure, whether that's a classic design bid build, a DBB, or a progressive DB. So we're looking at all the options. In regards to timeline, it's still pretty fluid. We're looking at probably a 5 to 6 year timeline, depending on the environmental review, the NEPA-SEPA process. But somewhere around 28, 29, we should be seeing some improvements on the ground at the underpass.
Great, and our last question goes to John with Clark County Today.
Every one of our leaders spoke about the most precious thing to people is time. And 15 miles to the west of here, the Interstate 5 bridge has brought an awful lot of attention as the single largest transportation and infrastructure project in the region's history. The bridge is a 3-lane bridge that is over congested. They're going to replace it with the 3-lane bridge. The project sponsors have already said morning commute times will double. If we're building for the future, for our children and our grandchildren, where's the value if we're not looking forward to the needs of the region for the next 50 to 100 years?
Well, I don't want to get into the detail of project design and something that's still being proposed and likely to come before the department. But what I will say is that we got to do two things at once. We've got to maintain what we have, repair it, get it back into the shape it needs to be in, so that we don't take a step backwards and lose the capacity that has been built. And we have to more smartly manage the capacity that we have. And that's why we're looking to visions that not only include the right kind of throughput for vehicle traffic, but also incorporate all of the different modes that need to be part of the picture so that congestion can be mitigated and managed. There are some problems that, in addition to making sure you have enough capacity, there's just not enough asphalt in the world to pave your way out of. And so we've got to make sure that we're not only enabling vehicles to move, but giving people great alternatives alongside that with active transportation and excellent transit, so that the system as a whole can absorb that increased traffic. And I'm looking forward for that to be contemplated in the different visions that state and local leaders bring to our department for consideration for funding.
Yeah, and it shouldn't be lost on anybody that part of the infrastructure investment here in Clark County and in other parts of this region is about more economic development on this side of the river. Okay, so we're not looking to the future as every job is going to be on the other side. We're going to promote a lot of economic development right here.
Let's get everybody really quick to